Some time back, in the year 1993, in a beautiful neighborhood in Dublin, Ohio, a man and a woman named Albert and Beverly were happily making arrangements for their wedding day. They weren't planning anything big. They wanted only their close friends and family to be there at their small outdoor wedding, an occasion spent with only the dearest loved ones that they would remember for the years to come. Albert and Beverly met at a small bakery about 2 years ago. You could say it was love at first sight. Waiting online together for coffee every morning slowly turned into having breakfast at the bakery together every morning. Albert and Beverly enjoyed talking to each other. They had a lot in common, and it wasn't long before they caught feelings for each other. It started with one date, which led to another, and another, and soon the two were in an intimate relationship. It had been a long 2 years since the two were together. Albert and Beverly were madly in love, and they wanted to be with each other for the rest of their lives. Albert and Beverly walked down the beautifully decorated flowered path in the garden. Their friends and family all watched them in awe as they stood facing one another. When they reached the altar, the officiant greeted them and everyone who had come to celebrate the memorable occasion. Friends and family, we have been invited here today to share with Albert Miller and Beverly Brandt a very important moment in their lives. In the years they have been together, their love and understanding of each other has grown and matured, and now they have decided to live their lives together as husband and wife. If any person can show a just cause why they may not be joined together, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Everyone was silent. They waited for the officiant to continue and for Albert and Beverly to take their vows. Albert and Beverly looked into each other's eyes and smiled. Just when the officiant was about to proceed, someone in the back called out. A woman angrily walked down the path. She pointed at Albert and firmly said, "I object to this marriage. This is illegal. You can't marry another woman because I am your wife, and you have not divorced me." Albert was in shock. Everyone in the reception gasped and murmured to each other, "He's already married? His wife is alive? And they aren't even divorced?" Beverly looked at Albert seeking an explanation. Albert said, "What? This is not true. My wife passed away a long time ago." The woman yelled out for all to hear, "Do not be deceived by this man. It was my mistake that day 7 years ago when I accepted him as my husband at a wedding just like this one. I am Hazel Miller, and I am this man's wife." Hazel pulled the ring off her finger and showed it to everyone. It had Albert's name engraved in it along with her own. Beverly was devastated. Out of all the things that could happen, she never expected something like this on her wedding day. Beverly nervously asked Albert, "What is going on, Albert?" Albert loudly said, "This is nonsense. Who let this woman in here? I don't even know her. She is a fraud." Albert held Beverly's hand. "Beverly, don't believe this woman. You've been with me for the past 2 years. You know my wife is no more." Beverly gripped Albert's hand tightly and wiped a tear from her eye. "I believe you, Albert." The wedding ceremony abruptly ended. Hazel continued on, claiming that she truly was Albert's wife. She demanded that she get her right as his spouse. All the guests soon dispersed and returned to their homes. The officiant tried to settle things, but the argument reached no end. At last, Albert was left with no choice. "I have proof that this woman is nothing but a fraud. I have the death certificate of my wife." Hazel insisted that Albert immediately provide the certificate so that they could get this over with. Albert looked at the woman. Was she crazy? It would be a matter of seconds before Albert would pull it out from his files. Why was she doing this? Albert, Beverly, and Hazel all went to his house. Beverly anxiously waited in the living room while Hazel paced back and forth. After a while, Albert returned from his study. He had a worried look on his face. "Beverly, trust me, I had it with me, but I can't seem to find it." "Huh, I told you. How long are you going to try to pull this act, Albert?" "Don't worry, Albert. If you're saying it's with you, it must be somewhere. I'll help you look for it. You must have misplaced it among all the papers." Beverly and Albert spent the next hour searching through all the files in the house, but they couldn't find any death certificate. "Give it up, Albert. How can you have a death certificate when I'm standing right in front of you?" "You woman, you are nothing but a liar. Beverly, I'll take you to my wife's grave. You can see it for yourself." "Yes, of course. Why not?" Hazel chuckled and got into the car with Beverly and Albert. They drove to the cemetery, and Albert led the two to his wife's grave. As he neared the path which led to the location of the tombstones, he was stunned to find the whole area in a different arrangement. His wife's tombstone was no longer there, and neither were the other tombstones besides her one. He hurried to one of the workers nearby. "Mister, my wife's grave was here. I can't seem to find her tombstone. You might want to check in at the cemetery office. The graveyard has recently gone through construction. Some of the tombstones were demolished in the process. Perhaps they will replace them." Hazel smirked and shook her head. "Why, Albert? Why are you doing this? What are you trying to prove? You're just exposing yourself." Beverly looked at Albert. She reassured him everything would be fine. "Albert, let's go to the office. We can check the register. I know they'll have her records there." The three headed to the cemetery office, where Albert asked the receptionist about the whereabouts of the grave of Hazel Miller. "Mr. Miller, I've checked all our records, and I've found a woman named Hazel Miller that had been buried here. Perhaps that was your wife." "Finally. Thank you. Thank you so much for your help." "What? This is ridiculous. There could be many women with the same name. You must check the date of birth. March 4th, 1963. Albert was amazed. How did this woman know his wife's date of birth? He turned to the receptionist and kindly asked for the date of birth of the woman that had been buried here. December 12, 1979. Albert furrowed his brow. How could this be? He pulled Beverly aside. "I don't know what to say, or what to do. I swear to you, Beverly, this woman is not my wife. My wife died many years ago." Beverly frantically looked at Hazel. She stood by the desk, tapping her feet and waiting for Albert. Albert had been a kind and loving boyfriend to her for the years that she had known him. He had been faithful and always supported her. Beverly loved Albert. This was an obstacle in their marriage she had to help Albert overcome. "Albert, calm down. Don't get so stressed. We'll figure this out." Albert paced around the office, holding his head. He suddenly stopped in his tracks. "We have to go to Illinois. My wife's sister, Rose, she lives there. She could testify that I'm being truthful." Hazel let out a deep breath and said, "You're not going alone. I'm going to see how long you try to cover up our marriage." It was a long and quiet road trip to Illinois. Rose was Albert's late wife, Hazel's elder sister. She lived by herself in a small house in Chicago. Albert drove into her driveway and parked his car. Rose was in the garden watering her flowers. She saw Albert step out of the car and hurried out of the lawn. Albert called her. "Rose, I need your help. You won't believe the trouble I've been dealing with." "What happened, Albert?" Just then, Hazel and Beverly got out of the car. Hazel rushed towards Rose. Rose widened her eyes and ran towards Hazel. "Little sister, I haven't seen you in so long. I missed you so much, Hazel." Albert was thundered. "What? What are you saying? This woman is not Hazel." Rose looked at Albert confused. "What? This is Hazel, your wife, my sister. Albert, are you okay?" Albert was going crazy. He kicked on the fence and shouted, "This is all a lie. This woman is not my wife." Beverly was reaching her breaking point. She wanted to believe Albert. She wanted to stand by him, but things weren't looking too great for him. Rose was frightened. "Hazel, what is going on?" Hazel explained everything to Rose. Rose invited everyone inside the house. She looked through her cupboards and took out a small album. She flipped through childhood pictures of herself and Hazel. Beverly was shocked. The resemblance was apparent. This woman was who she claimed to be. She was Hazel. Tears rolled down her cheek. Beverly stood up in anger. She stared at Albert, her eyes red with fury, and stormed out of the house. "It's over between me and you." Albert ran after Beverly as she walked down the empty road. "Beverly, listen to me. Where are you going? You're going to get lost out here." All Beverly wanted was to get away from Albert. She wished she could suddenly disappear. She couldn't bear Albert's drama anymore. Albert ran in front of her and stopped her. "Beverly, hear me out, just one last time. I have a confession to make to you. But before I tell you, I want you to know I've never loved anyone as much as I love you." Beverly silently stood there, folding her arms. She didn't even want to look at Albert. "I was married to a woman named Hazel. Everything that woman said about our marriage is true. But that woman is not my wife. She is not my wife, Hazel. My wife is dead, and there is a reason why I can say that with certainty. I killed Hazel. I killed her 6 years ago. I wanted to get rid of her from my life. I regretted marrying her. She was a burden for me. I managed to make it look like an accident, and after her funeral, everyone seemed to forget and move on. I got away with it. But after all these years, I don't know what this woman wants. I don't know why she's pretending to be Hazel. I don't want to hear your lies anymore, Albert. What about Rose? Was she lying? Were the pictures false? I tried to take your side, but after all of this, you expect that I will still believe you? Get out of my way. Those women were right. You are the real fraud." "Rose, I got worried when he spoke of the death certificate. The whole plan almost failed." "All these years, you didn't think I planned this out, Poppy? You don't know what I had to do to get my hands on that. I searched his entire house." It was 7 years ago when Hazel married Albert. Rose was against it from the start. She never liked Albert. But knowing her sister loved him, she never spoke out her mind. It was after the marriage, however, that Hazel often used to come to Rose and complain about Albert. Things weren't working out between them. Hazel often used to stay over at Rose's house due to the quarrels she had with Albert. It was one of these days that Rose suddenly received a call from Albert to inform her of Hazel's death. Rose was devastated. She knew her sister's death was no accident. She suspected Albert had done this, but she had no evidence. After all these years, in rage and agony, when she heard of Albert's second marriage, she was infuriated. She couldn't let Albert get away like this, as if he had done nothing. Rose knew exactly what to do. That's when she called Poppy. Poppy lived in California with her mother. Albert never met her before. Rose and Hazel were sisters. But Rose hadn't lied about Poppy either. Poppy was their younger stepsister and had quite a resemblance with Hazel. Poppy was the perfect person to pull off the act. Sending her to stop Albert's wedding was the last of Rose's steps to exposing Albert's secret. I miss Hazel. Me too, Poppy. This was for you, Hazel. Click on the subscribe button and check out more awesome videos on our channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon because you know it's interesting.